Under Clint Eastwood, how a boy nicknamed Samson became Hollywood's toughest cowboy. Before Clint Eastwood became a living legend, the embodiment of squinting justice and growling masculinity, he was a chubby kid nicknamed Samson. Not because he broke chains with bare hands, but because he was born in 1930 weighing over 11 pounds, and the nurses in the hospital immediately started preparing for the apocalypse. The family decided, if the kid started out like a strongman, his life wouldn't be easy, and they weren't wrong. The Great Depression. The Great Road Trip. Clint had the misfortune of being born during one of the darkest times in American history, the Great Depression. Money, what money? Bread and beans were a feast. Clint's father jumped from job to job, and the whole family wandered around California like a traveling circus in search of stability. By the time Clint hit puberty, he'd attended so many elementary schools he could have taught geography. But there were perks. Constant moving taught Clint not to get too attached to people, a skill that later came in handy on screen. After all, what kind of cowboy isn't a loner? Eventually, the family settled in Piedmont, a town a little less broke, a swimming pool, a club, a car. Though Clint rarely talked about this chapter, probably didn't fit the tough street guy image. Student, rebel, and accidental pyromaniac school wasn't exactly Clint's thing. He was held back a grade, maybe for disrespecting algebra, maybe for falling in love with a teacher. Then came the infamous incident where he was expelled for burning a scarecrow on school grounds. Some said it was rebellion, others say he was just bored. Then there was the time he carved a dirty word into a school bench. If it had happened today, he'd be TikTok famous. But in the 40s, you just got kicked out. Clint didn't seem to care. He switched schools and focused on what really mattered: cars, girls, and jazz. Piano, golf, and zero interest in acting. At Oakland Technical High School, Clint finally felt like himself. Not academically, of course. Musically. He got deeply into jazz and could play the piano for hours. He even earned the nickname Mozart with a wrench, since he also studied aircraft maintenance, just in case. Drama teachers tried to lure him into school plays. "Clint, you've got charisma." But Clint just shrugged and walked off. No one could have guessed this quiet guy would later become the king of cinematic stares. Back then, he just wanted to drive, jam on the piano, and dodge homework. The army, a plane crash, and an accidental first step toward fame. After high school, Clint didn't bother with college. Why, when you could join the army, in 1951, he was drafted and stationed at Fort Ord, and then, like something straight out of a movie, disaster struck. The plane he was on crashed into the ocean, and Clint swam over 2 miles to shore. It was almost his first and last role. Luckily, he survived. Later, he said that ordeal taught him to stay cool under pressure, especially useful when holding a revolver. After the army, Clint happened to be at a party in Malibu, where he met a director, and then the ball started rolling. First, bit parts, then icon. But that came later. Bottom line? Clint Eastwood didn't grow up like a superhero. He was just a regular American kid with rhythm in his fingers and no love for school. He didn't dream of stardom, didn't haunt auditions, wasn't the life of the drama club. He just lived, messed up, swam for his life, and one day found himself in the right place at the right time. And if you think the road to fame is all about theater school and perfect attendance, take a look at Clint. Sometimes all you need is to survive a plane crash and walk right past the school play without a second glance. Clint Eastwood, Samson with a baby bottle, and a cowboy attitude. If you thought Clint Eastwood was born with a cigar in his mouth and a revolver in his hand, you're almost right. In reality, he came into the world like a true superhero. 11.5 pounds of pure Californian man. The doctors gasped, the nurses crossed themselves nervously, and the baby earned the nickname Samson. His very first victory was over the womb itself, from which, apparently, he emerged roaring, "I'll direct my own life, thanks." Clint was a difficult child, not because he threw tantrums, but because, well, he carved inappropriate phrases into the school scoreboard and burned effigies right on campus. He wasn't expelled for laziness or poor grades. Clint simply didn't believe in authority. Teachers got angry, the principal nervously smoked, and Eastwood kept marching to his own beat. Instead of school plays, he preferred tinkering with engines and hanging out in jazz clubs. He didn't dream of becoming an actor. He wanted to be a jazzman. Imagine Clint Eastwood not with a Winchester but with a piano. He'd play American jazz standards late into the night, practicing until his fingers bled. Music was his first true passion, and girls listened breathlessly as the future action star tickled the ivories in the dark. But the most cinematic moment of his youth wasn't school or music. While serving in the army, his plane crashed into the ocean. Eastwood survived, swimming nearly 2 miles in pitch blackness, clinging to a life raft and his own stubborn will. That's when he realized, death isn't scary, especially when you've still got 70 years of career and 10 kids by various women ahead of you. Clint Eastwood, soldier of misfortune, or how the army saved Hollywood before becoming the living symbol of masculinity and the perfect cowboy with a "I'm gonna shoot you all" look. Clint Eastwood cleaned swimming pools in the army. Yes, while other guys were jumping out of planes and training for war in Korea, Clint was saving drowning soldiers and flexing his perfect muscles in swim trunks. Boys went to the front, and he went to the chlorine. But let's start at the beginning. By the early 1950s, Clint had no plan, no degree, and no real ambitions. He drifted from job to job, selling groceries, hauling lumber, occasionally sneaking into bars with buddies. He lived by the formula, work, cars, girls. Classic stuff. And then along came the draft board. The army grabbed him quickly. Tall, healthy, unmarried, perfect for the military. Well, sort of. In reality, Clint was assigned to the U.S. Army's Fort Ord base in California, far from the Korean front. And that's where the magic begins. First of all, he became a swimming instructor. Yes, the future Dirty Harry first taught soldiers how to float. Life is unfair. Some crawl through the mud with rifles, others oil up their shoulders by the pool and get paid for it. Second, he met the right people. Fort Ord was not just a training center. It was a hub for semi-celebrities, actors, musicians, and rising stars. It was here Clint first heard the words, "Kid, you should be in the movies." And why not, nearly 2 meters tall, with a kill-you-with-a-glance stare, already working with audiences in swimwear? What's not to like? Now here's a scene worthy of Hollywood. On his way back from leave, Clint boards a plane. The plane crashes, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the ocean. Broken navigation, darkness, water, panic. But our hero doesn't panic. He simply swims to shore. No stuntmen, no doubles, no Coast Guard, just Clint. Because Clint, later he'd say, thought I'd die, but somehow I didn't. Like it was just a fluke. Military service didn't turn him into a war hero, but it gave him something even better. Connections, experience, a near-death story, and a little romance. Yes, it was around this time he met Maggie Johnson, the woman he would later marry, though their marriage wasn't exactly by the book, but more on that later. So if you thought the army made Clint a man, you're right, but not with guns, with pools, girls, and a plane crash. As he himself once said, "I was a drifter, just rolling through life until I got drafted." And now we know, sometimes the military doesn't forge stars in combat, but next to the lifeguard stand. How Clint Eastwood became a star by accident, almost in his underwear. They say success is when opportunity meets preparation. In Clint Eastwood's case, it was when a tall, sexually silent man accidentally stumbled into Hollywood because he was simply too handsome to work in a car repair shop. Seriously, who would send a guy like that to change brake pads? After serving in the army, Clint, like a decent American guy, tried to go back to regular life. He drove fuel trucks, carried sacks, took odd jobs. Everything was modest and humble until he got noticed. No, not by MGM scouts, but by a woman. Yes, a real important woman, a secretary from Universal. She saw him and bam, off he went. Who would have thought that being tall, brooding, and owning a perfect jawline would be enough to get you a meeting at a studio? But hey, it was the 50s. Simpler times. Director's first reaction? Predictable. He's handsome, but he talks like a wooden plank. Yep, young Clint spoke as if he'd swallowed nails and forgot how to exhale. They made him take diction lessons, facial expression classes, and basically taught him how to behave like a human being instead of a human statue. But honestly, audiences liked exactly that. He wasn't acting, he was just existing. And that was enough. His career started with crumbs. Background roles, Cowboy Nara 3, Pilot Nara 2, Lover Nara 8. Sometimes he didn't even get credited, but he learned the most important thing, how to look like he's about to shoot someone, even when he's just holding a cup of coffee. That became his signature move. The turning point came with his role in Rawhide. Eastwood played a cowboy with the eyes of a killer and a voice like he'd just swallowed cactus pollen. The show became a hit, and suddenly the whole world wanted to know who this guy was. The one who said the least, but looked like a war god in a hat. So no, Clint didn't come to Hollywood because he was in love with acting. He came because he had the perfect face, a grim stare, and an expressionless delivery. And people loved it. He became the symbol of the real man, the kind who didn't need words. He just looked, and everyone got the message. Clint Eastwood behind the camera. How a tight-lipped cowboy became Director of the Year, according to himself. Who would have thought that the grim-faced cowboy with the eternal squint would one day decide to sit in the director's chair? Yes, that same Eastwood who had spent his life shooting bad guys in silence suddenly thought, what if I just directed myself? Apparently at some point he got tired of waiting for someone to offer him a good role, so he decided to give one to himself. Genius. His first directorial experience was the film Play Misty for Me, 1971, where he didn't just direct, he starred too. Naturally, he played another brooding man with inner turmoil. What else? He's no Charlie Chaplin. It turned out pretty good, and audiences were surprised. Turns out Clint doesn't just stare into the distance and shoot people, he actually thinks too. Then the floodgates opened. Movies started rolling out like clockwork. Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby, American Sniper, Gran Torino. And they all have a familiar pattern. Tough men, complicated pasts, minimal words, maximum bullets, or, in the softer ones, deep moral dilemmas. Eastwood's characters all have that same vibe. Don't mess with me, written across their foreheads. But inside, a tornado of emotions and unresolved childhood trauma. But to be fair, he's a great director. Critics love him. The Academy gives him Oscars. Actors line up to work with him. Why? Because he directs fast, sharp, and with zero nonsense. One scene, one take. Problems, handled with a stare. Script? Who needs it? It's all in his head anyway. He knows how to make audiences feel things. In $1 Million Baby, people bawled their eyes out. In Gran Torino, they felt sorry for a cranky old racist. In American Sniper, they held their breath for the permanently silent marksman. That's Eastwood for you. He makes films where the main emotion comes through the eyes, not CGI, not action, not explosions. His style is about what happens after the credits roll, when you're still sitting there thinking, damn, how does he do it? And this old guy, who should probably be enjoying retirement already, still pumps out a film a year. He shoots stories about aging, honor, and loneliness. Because Clint isn't just a director anymore. He's a genre, a brand, a symbol. Clint Eastwood. Old age isn't fun, but it's no reason to quit making movies. Seriously, have you seen how old Clint Eastwood is? This man hasn't just outlived all his characters, he's outlived half of Hollywood. While other stars age and end up in vitamin commercials, Clint keeps making movies like he's got another 30 years ahead of him. And in those movies, he's not some grandpa baking cookies and telling bedtime stories. Nope, he's still the hero, sometimes too much of a hero. In Gran Torino, he plays a grumpy old man with more bullets than kind words. Everyone thought this must be his farewell film. Like he's saying goodbye to the audience, leaving on a high note. Ha, sure. Just a couple of years later, he's back at it. The mule. Cry macho. And once again, he's front and center, solving problems, fighting, saving people, suffering, sometimes even on horseback. It seems like Clint found the eternal formula. Take a script with a strong, silent man, and just write yourself into it. Even if the character is supposed to be 40, no big deal. The audience will deal with it. Who's going to say, "You're too old for this"? He'll just shoot you that look, and that'll be the end of that conversation. And he really loves those storylines where the hero is retired but forced to return. That's totally his thing. He's just sitting there minding his business, and bam, drug cartel, mafia, kidnapped grandson, someone insulted his horse. What choice does he have? Of course, he has to step in. He's the hero again, even if his back's a little stiff. And what's amazing is, he still fits these roles. Maybe because he genuinely lives his characters, or maybe because no one dares to tell him no. Who's going to argue with a living legend who's the director, producer, actor, and probably also the guy fixing the lighting on set? And people still show up to watch, even young folks who only know him as that old guy from the meme. They watch his films and go, "Damn, Grandpa's badass." Because Eastwood isn't just an actor anymore. He's a symbol of the old school days, where emotions are shown through wrinkles and drama is delivered in silence. So if you ever think that at 90 it's time to retire, watch Clint's latest movie, and you'll feel ashamed of being lazy, because if he can do it, then so can you. Or at least stop whining. Somewhere out there, Clint is already planning his next film, and chances are he'll be starring in it again. Clint Eastwood, the grandpa who directs movies better than your favorite TikTokers. If you thought Clint Eastwood was just a grumpy old man with a stone-cold face and a revolver in his holster, let me disappoint you. This grandpa is also a director, and not just to kill time in retirement. He's dead serious. He makes movies faster than other pensioners complain about Gen Z on the bus. It all started in the 1970s, when Clint suddenly thought, why not do it all myself? Apparently, he figured no one could film a scene where he stares silently into the camera better than he could. Since then, he's directed more than 40 films, won 4 Oscars, and earned a pile of other awards he probably doesn't even know about because he doesn't read the press. So what makes Eastwood special? First, he shoots fast, really fast. While other directors reshoot a coffee on the table scene 10 times, Clint does 1 take and moves on. The crew's too afraid to sneeze. What if that's already the final cut? Second, he loves realism. His characters don't jump off rooftops with machine guns or save the world in supercars. They suffer, stare into the distance, drink whiskey, and ponder life. You sit in the theater watching someone eat scrambled eggs and suddenly realize, this movie is about you. He also adores filming about America, the real America. Not the one where everyone smiles at Starbucks, but the one where people lose jobs, suffer through wars, fall in love, die, all accompanied by some dry piano music. Take $1 Million Baby, for example. A sports drama? Yeah, right. It's a film that leaves you lying in the dark, asking yourself, why do I even exist? Most importantly, there's no pretentiousness in his films, no one saving the planet, but everyone is trying to save themselves or failing to. Because with Eastwood, everything's honest. The weak may die, the strong may break. And an old man can be cooler than everyone without even firing a shot. By the way, he's still filming, still acting too, Because who else can he trust to play the role of an old cowboy with back pain and a tragic past? Certainly not Timothée Chalamet. That's Clint for you. Says little, films fast, acts deep. A director of the old school, showing the world that you don't need CGI, green screens, or 3 stunt doubles to make a great movie. What you need is that look, the one that makes you want to apologize just for eating popcorn too loudly in the theater. And while young directors whine that the industry is hard, Clint quietly shoots his next movie. Because, as the saying goes, old school is the best school. Clint Eastwood, the cowboy who votes. Clint Eastwood isn't just a man with a permanent squint and a face that looks like he's judging your life choices. He's a cowboy at heart, on screen, and surprisingly, in politics. Yep, while you were busy thinking he's just a director and actor, Eastwood's been galloping through the wild west of American political life. First of all, he's neither Democrat nor Republican, but something like his own party. Clint is a firm believer in freedom, personal responsibility, and the idea that the government should stay out of your business. He's basically that grandpa yelling at the TV, "Leave people alone." In 1986, he randomly decided Hollywood wasn't enough and became the mayor of Carmel, a small town in California. Not because he craved power, he just wasn't allowed to build a restaurant there, so he figured, why not become mayor and approve it myself? And that's how we got the first mayor who solved a problem in 1 term, and then said, "I'm out, this is boring." But that's not the end of the story. In 2012, Eastwood jumped into the political circus by speaking at the Republican National Convention. There, he gave a speech to an empty chair, as if President Obama were sitting in it. Some said, "Brilliant performance." Others asked, "Clint, are you okay?" But he was just being himself, dry, ironic, and slightly out of this world. Still, he's not a fan of Trump or Biden. In one interview, he said, "I'd just like politicians to act a little more decent and stop yelling at each other." And honestly, Grandpa's got a point. This decade has us forgetting how to argue without threats and all caps. Eastwood believes that everyone should take care of themselves. Don't expect handouts from the government. Better to grab your rifle, shoot a movie, and maybe become mayor. Or at the very least, stop whining in the comments section. He doesn't chase likes, doesn't make political Instagram posts, and probably has no idea what TikTok is. But he remains an influential figure. Not because he talks the loudest, but because he speaks simply and to the point. Also because he looks like if you disagree with him, he'll just slowly put on his cowboy hat and walk off into the sunset, leaving you in awkward silence. That's Clint Old, freedom-loving, and still the ultimate cowboy, even in politics. Clint Eastwood and women, the cowboy with a harem. If Clint Eastwood got an Oscar for every romance he had, he'd need a custom-built trophy shelf shaped like the Pentagon. This is a man who speaks less than he acts, but clearly doesn't need words to win hearts. And just how many hearts he's captured? Well, let someone try to count them. Eastwood has always been like the hero in his westerns. Walks into the scene, squints a bit, and boom, the woman is already in love. He never chased attention. It stuck to him like dust on cowboy boots. He wasn't particularly loyal or interested in building a cozy nest either. His relationships were more like a survival marathon. Whoever could last the longest beside a perpetually silent man who directs films, philosophizes about freedom, and might disappear for a month in the jungle with a camera. He has 8 children from 6 different women. And that's just the official count. Some joke that Eastwood didn't just leave behind cult films, but also a trail of offspring in nearly every state. His first wife, Maggie Johnson, was with him for nearly 30 years, and during that time, Eastwood had more than a few flings. In fact, not 1 or 2. He had affairs with actresses, dancers, flight attendants, basically anyone with a pulse and some charm. One of his most well-known partners was actress Sondra Locke. They lived together for 14 years, without marriage, and with plenty of drama, scandals, and mutual accusations. After the breakup, Locke sued him, claiming he ruined her career. Eastwood, in return, simply kept making movies and stayed silent, as if nothing had happened. Then came a journalist, younger actresses, fleeting romances, and finally, in 2012, he remarried, this time to TV host Dina Ruiz. But even that marriage didn't last. They divorced in 2014. Apparently, not even TV cameras could hold this wild Mustang at home. Today, Clint is over 90, but rumor has it he's still not alone. Maybe that's the secret to his longevity? Who knows? But one thing is for sure. Eastwood is not about romance. He's about passion, not dinner by candlelight, but I got you the lead role, let's shoot. His life had everything. Love, betrayal, kids, scandals. But just like a true cowboy, he always rode off into the sunset in style, leaving behind broken hearts and great screenplays. How Clint Eastwood turned from Iron Cowboy into Iron Director. You thought Clint Eastwood was just a cowboy with a stone face and a Colt on his hip? Well, think again. This man, famous for having the most intense squint in the history of cinema, somehow managed to quietly transform himself from a Western hero into one of Hollywood's most respected directors, and he did it so smoothly, half the audience didn't even notice when he swapped his saddle for a director's chair. It all started out pretty modestly. After dozens of roles where Clint mostly stayed silent and killed bad guys with a philosophical expression, he decided that cinema was lacking something, meaning. So he started directing himself. His first shot at it, Play Misty for Me in 1971, was like a test bullet. Quiet, without fuss, but right on target. And then, everything started clicking. He became a director who didn't just know where to put the camera, but also knew where not to overdo it. On Eastwood's set, it's all calm and orderly. No hundreds of takes, no hysterical producers. He films quickly, efficiently, and without whining. People say that actors don't even act for him, they just exist on screen. That's how natural everything feels. In 1992, he released Unforgiven, and Hollywood gasped. The film won 4 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Who would have thought that the silent guy from the Westerns could create such deep cinema? And then he just kept going. Mystic River, Million Dollar Baby, Changeling, American Sniper. Eastwood started handing out masterpieces like he had an endless stash of great scripts and sharp ideas in his back pocket. And more often than not, he wasn't just the director. He was also the producer, the composer, and sometimes even the lead actor. Basically the Swiss Army knife of Hollywood, one man with the power of a whole studio. The most interesting thing, Clint does all of this in his own quiet style, no scandals, no red carpet dramas. While other directors are busy posing in front of limos, he just shows up to set, shoots the movie, and goes home. No noise, no ego, just pure professionalism. Today he's well into his 90s, but he's still working. In 2021 he directed Cry Macho and even starred in it again. Maybe because he loves it, or maybe because he simply doesn't know how to rest. One thing is clear. Clint Eastwood is not just a veteran actor. He's a man who took Hollywood by the collar and, quietly and without a fuss, showed everyone how real cinema is made. When you say little but mean everything, Clint Eastwood and his legendary one-liners. Clint Eastwood is that kind of man who can look at you for 3 minutes, say one word, and you're already apologizing, even if you haven't done anything wrong. His communication style is minimalism at the edge of terrifying zen. He's not just an actor or director, he's a brand of silence. Kind of like IKEA, but instead of furniture, it's phrases that send a chill down your spine. Let's revisit his golden classic. Go ahead, make my day. A line from Dirty Harry that made criminals instantly reconsider their life choices. Maybe because in Clint's eyes there wasn't just acting, there was the very real intention to end the scene with one take and one body. And it wasn't a one-off moment. His lines are never showy, wordy, or trying to explain themselves. Why bother? If you're right, a look is enough. If you're wrong, a look is still enough. Just a more regretful one. Behind the scenes, rumor has it, Eastwood talks exactly the same way. One glance, and the entire crew instantly knows it's time to shut up and get to work. No yelling, no drama, everything is calm, quiet, and with a faint hint of dread. Some cameramen have confessed they weren't sure if he was directing a movie or preparing for a bank robbery. What's fascinating is that this very restraint made him a hero to millions. In an age where everyone loves to shout on TikTok and argue on Twitter, enters a man who says, "Less talk, more action." And everyone goes, "Yes, sir." His famous, "A man's got to know his limitations," isn't just a movie line, it's a life philosophy, especially for those who, at 40, still write, "finding myself" in their bio. With Clint, it's simple. Know your limits, don't embarrass yourself, want more, be better. That's it. Need motivation? Just remember that quote and start doing push-ups. He even swears rarely, and politely. In his films, profanity sounds like a final argument, not just filler between thoughts. He doesn't or like. His version of like is a direct shot to the enemy's heart. And yes, Eastwood is over 90, and he still looks like a man who can knock you out. Not loudly, not with a warning, but with a life lesson attached. In the end, Clint's communication style is a mix of silent charisma, sharp one-liners, and a stare that can replace a 3-page monologue. He doesn't just speak, he carves each word with a blade. To Clint Eastwood, the cowboy who bought California. When we say Clint Eastwood, most people picture a lean guy in a hat who solves problems with quiet stares and precise shots. But behind that stoic exterior hides a true Californian real estate mogul with the soul of a landscape designer and the wallet of a very responsible millionaire. Yes, friends, Clint Eastwood is not just a director, actor, and national treasure of the United States. He's also the real estate agent of his own dreams. This man has bought and restored so much land that if he wanted to, he could declare independence from the state of California and become president of his own Pacific Ranch nation. Let's start with Mission Ranch in Carmel. In 1986, when most stars were spending their money on yachts and cocaine, Eastwood bought 22 acres of pastoral decay for $5 million. And he didn't buy it for bragging rights or wild parties with champagne and Victoria's Secret models on every sofa. He bought it to save it. Yes, to save a ranch from greedy developers, like some kind of Hollywood Greenpeace agent with a Colt in his holster. And what do you think happened next? He didn't just save it. He turned that wreck into a pastoral dream with a restaurant, tennis courts, and postcard-perfect views. It became so beautiful that even the sheep on the pastures started wearing hats and asking for autographs. Mission Ranch became a landmark of Carmel, the same town where, by the way, Clint served as mayor, either out of boredom or simply because he wanted to approve his own gazebo permits. But the mission didn't end there. In 2010, when most people at 80 are signing up for yoga and solving crossword puzzles, Clint built himself a modest villa of 1,549 square feet. That's roughly 1.5 football fields. Estimated value, around $20 million. And it's still in Carmel. Apparently, Clint just flat-out refused to leave the city he built with his own hands. And that's not all. There's also Rising River Ranch, purchased back in 1978. 167 acres of scenic nature in Northern California, previously owned by none other than Bing Crosby. This isn't some little lakeside cabin. This is a massive chunk of America, where you can get lost, go gray, find yourself, and get lost again. Clint just uses it to relax, from his villa. And if you think he's just collecting pretty houses like others collect stamps, then you clearly don't know Eastwood. He doesn't just buy land, he preserves it. He's involved in environmental projects, buying up coastal areas just to make sure no shopping malls or luxury homes from three-fours appear on them. He does this quietly, like everything else in his life. No press releases, no publicity stunts. Because when you're Clint Eastwood, even the grass growing on your property speaks for you. You could say Clint isn't just an actor. He's more like the gardener of California. Strong, silent, purposeful. While other stars burn millions on islands that sink after 2 years, Eastwood invests in things that last for centuries. Land, nature, and timeless style. The moral of the story: want to be like Clint? Forget the yacht, grab a hat, and start buying land. Or at least go to Carmel and see how it's done by a legend. Clint Eastwood and his $1,000,000 wheels, a cowboy in the land of supercars. If you thought Clint Eastwood only rides horses and parks to the tune of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, you've seriously underestimated this Hollywood cowboy, because when he's not busy shooting, directing, or saving the environment, Clint collects cars. And not just any cars, but true four-wheeled legends that make car enthusiasts drop their jaws and forget how to breathe. Let's start with the star of his garage, the 1964 Shelby Cobra 289. This isn't just a car, it's a myth on wheels. Clint bought it back when gas was cheap and coffee wasn't served in liter-sized buckets. He kept it for decades, treating it like a sacred artifact, refusing to sell even when offered a jaw-dropping $4. $5 million! I mean, this man could have bought another mansion in Malibu, but he said, "No, let it gather dust in the barn, it's part of my soul." And honestly, you believe him. Next up in our dream showroom is the 1966 Ferrari 275 GTB. This beauty wasn't just bought, it was gifted to Clint for his role in The Witches. Yes, folks, while some actors got a free lunch and a t-shirt from the set, Eastwood got a Ferrari worth around $1.73 million, and this isn't just any car. It's like owning a mobile museum of Italian design turned up to 11. And now, buckle up. His collection also includes beasts like the Ferrari 250 GT Lusso, which sounds like the name of an opera singer, doesn't it? Yet another 1964 Cobra, in case the first one feels moody. And even a GMC Typhoon, a 90s rarity that went faster than it looked. What's really funny is that Clint never flaunted these cars. He didn't cruise through Beverly Hills with the top down and flashy sunglasses like a rapper in a music video. He's more the kind of guy who'd quietly step out of a 60-year-old Ferrari, adjust his hat, and casually say, "Clutch feels a little stiff today." Then drive off into the sunset, leaving behind only the smell of gasoline and a trail of envy. What sets Clint apart from your typical Hollywood car collector? He doesn't collect for Instagram likes. His garage isn't a museum of vanity, it's a shrine to old-school style. Every scratch tells a story, every dent is a memory, and every exhaust note is like the final chord in a movie. And by the way, these cars aren't just sitting there. Clint reportedly still drives them, like a regular person who's totally comfortable squeezing a Ferrari into a grocery store parking spot. Because when you're Clint Eastwood, you don't need a chauffeur. You barely need anyone at all, except maybe a solid engine and a good exhaust rumble. So next time you hear that Clint has quietly disappeared off the radar again, don't be surprised. He's probably just fired up his old Cobra, turned on the radio, and gone for a drive to see how the roads are doing, because if anyone knows that real cowboys never disappear, they just keep on driving, preferably in a multi-million-dollar car. Clint Eastwood. Whoever has the gun has the mansion. While most retirees are arguing about when to water their tomatoes, Clint Eastwood, well into his 90s, keeps raking in millions as if he's planning to buy the moon. As of 2025, his net worth is estimated to be around $375–400 million, and we're not talking Bitcoin here. We're talking old-school, heavyweight, hard cash. Money made from movies where he shoots first, squints intensely, and rides off into the sunset. So where did all that money come from? Easy. Clint's not just an actor. He's a director, producer, and a man who knew how to make movies long before Netflix started handing out deals to anyone with an iPhone. His company, Malpazzo Productions, is a small factory for churning out cinematic hits and seven-figure paychecks, and he's never been known to waste money on nonsense. Okay, yes, he owns a $23 million private jet, but at least he didn't buy an NFT of a dancing dog. His real estate portfolio alone is worth $35 million, and no, that's not just one house. Clint's got properties like a proper Hollywood boss, ranches, mansions, and even a slice of coastline that could easily serve as the set for another Western if studios ever run out of ideas. His favorite home? One with a view of the ocean. Because if you're a Hollywood legend, you don't stare at your neighbor's barbecue from the window. But the real treasure isn't in houses or jets or movie royalties, it's in golf. Yes, that slow-moving sport where you chase a little ball until you drop from exhaustion. Eastwood is part owner of Pebble Beach Golf Links, one of the world's most expensive golf clubs, and rumor has it, he even shoots films there. Maybe a sequel called A Few Strokes More. Clint himself says he doesn't chase money. Well, of course he doesn't. It just happens that he owns stocks, a studio, private jet flights, and probably a seat at any table he wants, including the Oval Office, should he get bored in retirement. One of the sweetest, and somehow shocking, facts. Eastwood still drives himself around. Of course, it's not in a Camry. We're talking a Shelby Cobra and a couple of Ferraris, but that's beside the point. He could be chauffeured in a Rolls-Royce, but why bother? He is the Rolls-Royce of men. According to financial experts, his assets are so diversified that even if Hollywood collapses tomorrow, he'll still be sitting by the fireplace in his mansion, reading scripts printed on velvet paper, sipping whiskey from a glass more expensive than your apartment lease. What's amazing is that Eastwood doesn't flaunt his wealth. He doesn't build Golden Gates, buy islands, or throw parties with DJs and champagne waterfalls. Everything is just as a true lone wolf would have it. Expensive, but tasteful. He's like a vault, plain on the outside, filled with diamonds and secrets on the inside. And here you are, reading this, thinking, no way Grandpa Eastwood is richer than all the rappers combined. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Californian sunset, he's silently putting on his cowboy hat, slamming the door of his private jet, and heading to a business meeting, probably on a golf course, because being Clint Eastwood isn't a job, it's a lifestyle, and, as it turns out, a very profitable one. Clint Eastwood, a real cowboy in the game of love. A family saga wilder than any Western. If you thought that only revolvers fired in Clint Eastwood's movies, you're sorely mistaken. Because in real life, he fired shots. Straight from the heart, yes? Our favorite polished tough guy with hawk eyes is actually a champion of tangled family trees. Buckle up, dear readers. It's about to get spicy. It all began in 1959. At the time, Clint was married to his first wife, Maggie Johnson, when he met stuntwoman Roxanne Tunis, and thus began an affair that lasted 14 years. In 1964, their daughter Kimber was born. But all of this was kept hush-hush, until 1989, when tabloids finally dragged this family skeleton out of the closet. So yes, Clint managed to star in several iconic roles, become a Hollywood legend, and then, surprise. Oh, I guess I have a grown daughter. But wait, there's more. While the public was still processing that secret, another story began. In 1975, still technically married, Clint started a romance with actress Sondra Locke. And this wasn't just a fling, it was a Hollywood romance at its finest. Joint movies, glamorous premieres, public appearances, and nearly 15 years together. But the ending wasn't happily ever after. It was a lawsuit. Sondra sued him for fraud and sabotage, claiming Clint arranged a bogus contract for her with Warner Brothers to prevent her from directing films when love turns into a legal thriller. By the way, his marriage to Maggie Johnson officially lasted until 1984. Yep, 30 years of marriage, a good portion of which operated on what we'll politely call the friendly acquaintances setting. Now cue the drum roll. Clint Eastwood has 8 officially recognized children by 6 different women. And who knows, Maybe a few more cowboy-eyed kids are roaming America unaware that Dirty Harry is their biological dad. The mothers of his children include flight attendant Jocelyn Reeves, mum to actor Scott Eastwood, actress Frances Fisher, and a few other less public women. Clint didn't always acknowledge his children immediately. Some were recognized years later, others after journalist digging. Biographers say Eastwood fell in love as easily as some people light a cigarette. Well, what did you expect from a cowboy? Long deliberations. And all of this happened behind the stoic, almost meditative screen persona. On screen, he's the icy blade of justice in Gran Torino, but off-screen, he's a full-fledged romantic outlaw. Some might call him unreliable, others a heartbreaker, but tabloids simply call it classic Hollywood drama. Clint Eastwood isn't just the symbol of old-school Hollywood. He's a man who managed to build not one empire, but three. A legendary career, a towering filmography, and apparently a dynastic family legacy. In this wild family tale, one thing is clear. Live your life so your biography reads like an Oscar-winning screenplay, or in Clint's case, like a spaghetti western with a twist of soap opera. If his life were a movie, the tagline would be, "Love, Lies, and a Revolver," all right on schedule. Dirty Harry. How one Clint Eastwood glare blew up Hollywood. If Clint Eastwood had been born in the age of TikTok, one silent squint would have earned him 1 billion views. But in 1971, he did something far more impressive. He played Dirty Harry and quite literally blew up American pop culture. That role didn't just make him a star, it made him a symbol, a man whose silence screamed louder than most actors' monologues. Dirty Harry wasn't just a film, it was an ideology with a .44 Magnum in its hand. Harry Callahan was a cop who didn't bother with red tape. Criminals, he didn't negotiate. The courts, too slow. Human rights, maybe later if the mood struck. The badge was just decoration. Justice came from the business end of his revolver. And that's when the moral panic exploded, while moviegoers cheered, shouting, "Yes, that's how you deal with scum." Critics and activists clutched their pearls. This isn't cinema, it's a manual for police brutality, declared liberal newspapers. Feminists protested outside the Oscars, waving signs like, "Dirty Harry is a dirty fantasy." The film, they argued, glorified vigilante justice and made brutality look cool. And what did Clint do? He just stood there with that legendary stone-cold stare that basically said, "I don't care, sweetheart." In interviews, he repeatedly emphasized that Harry was a character, a reflection of a specific part of society. But the critics weren't having it. What alarmed them more was that teenagers were mimicking the line, "Do you feel lucky, punk?" before, let's say, testing out Harry's methods in real life. The movie exploded at the box office. It spawned sequels and solidified Eastwood's image as the ultimate tough guy, the kind of man who solves problems by quietly reaching for his gun. But it also turned him into public enemy number one for the liberal elite. For a while, Clint became the face of violent America, the kind that doesn't ask questions, it just punches first. Interestingly, decades later, critics started changing their tune. Some called the film a masterwork of anti-hero cinema. Others saw it as a bitter satire on a broken justice system. But when it first premiered, Dirty Harry hit like pepper spray in the face, sharp, shocking, and absolutely impossible to ignore. Still, no matter how loud the outrage, the film became iconic. Some saw it as a threat to democracy, others saw it as common sense in a world gone soft. And Clint? He kept walking forward, playing lone wolves and stoic cowboys who handled their business without whining. Because in Hollywood, just like in the gritty streets of San Francisco, the winner is the guy with a magnum under his belt and nerves of steel. To sum it up, Dirty Harry wasn't just a movie. It was a mirror, the kind of mirror many people didn't want to look into. But even the loudest protests couldn't hide the truth. Eastwood didn't just play a role, he became a cultural force. The empty chair talk, how Clint Eastwood accidentally became a political stand-up star. Every person has a moment in life when they talk to themselves. But if you're Clint Eastwood, you do it live on national television in front of the whole of America, and not just talk to yourself. You talk to an empty chair, which, in your imagination, contains Barack Obama. Welcome to the 2012 Republican National Convention, the night when a movie cowboy decided to become a political comedian, and did it so well that even his fans couldn't stop laughing. It all began solemnly enough. The audience expected to see a legend, a macho man who shoots straight, speaks little, and looks like the embodiment of the good old America. And then Eastwood walks out. At first, everything goes fine. Applause, camera flashes, TV anchors whispering excitedly. And then he turns to the empty chair. No, you heard that right. An empty chair. From that moment, we witnessed the strangest event American politics had seen since Joe Biden's "I'm not a robot" moment. Clint began speaking to the chair as if the current president of the United States was actually sitting there. Complaints, sarcasm, rhetorical jabs, all aimed at a piece of furniture. Picture an 82-year-old man pausing dramatically as if someone was answering back. At best, it was puzzling. At worst, a live promo for memory loss medication. Of course, the crowd applauded. It was a Republican audience, after all. But online, it was meme heaven. A new phenomenon was born. Eastwooding, when you sit across from an empty chair and argue with an invisible opponent. Someone even launched a Tumblr page dedicated to the greatest furniture debates. People across America staged photo shoots imitating Clint, arguing with stools, armchairs, even microwaves. Critics lost their minds. But this is Eastwood, a symbol of America, a hero. How could he humiliate himself like this? Liberal media gleefully declared, "This is what happens when Republicans rely on geriatrics." Some even claimed it was actually satire, a clever mockery of Republican rhetoric. But no, Clint later confessed it was all improvised. No speechwriters, no script. He just walked out and started talking, said he felt inspired, maybe by the air conditioning blowing toward the stage. To his credit, Eastwood later admitted that if he had a do-over, he might have done things differently. But it was too late. The internet had already exploded. Journalists were writing headlines like "Cowboy versus Furniture," and audiences split into two camps, those crying with laughter and those just crying. But let's not be too harsh. Eastwood is an actor, not a politician. And that night, he played possibly the most awkward, yet most viral role of his life. He didn't give America a plan, a policy, or a reform. He gave us a show. And in the age of Twitter and TikTok, that's arguably more important. So while other politicians come armed with speechwriters, teleprompters, and PR teams, Clint showed up with only himself, his charisma, and one lonely chair. And you know what? In a twisted way, that's genius, because 10 years later, no one remembers what Mitt Romney said that night. But everyone remembers Clint and the chair. And that, my friends, is art. Clint Eastwood, a cowboy with a rifle in one hand and a political scandal in the other. If you think Clint Eastwood is just some old guy who used to chase bandits in dusty boots, then you've clearly missed the most entertaining part. Because Eastwood isn't just an actor. He's a walking conflict, a political cocktail of patriotism, blunt honesty, and an unexpected splash of liberalism. Here's your typical story. Just an ordinary evening in America. The news channels calmly discussing the economy, and then, bam, Eastwood decides to give an interview. Or worse, he directs a war movie. And that's it. Twitter goes into meltdown, CNN clutches its pearls, and Fox News gives him a standing ovation. Because Eastwood doesn't know how to talk safely. He either drives the nail of truth straight into your forehead, or he throws it into the crowd and waits to see who screams first. For example, he openly supports same-sex marriage. Liberals cheer, "Look at this progressive grandpa." But then Eastwood immediately adds that political correctness annoys him like a rash after nettles. And he's a proud member of the NRA, the National Rifle Association, meaning the guy probably owns more guns than pots and pans. Liberals panic, conservatives rejoice. And everyone else is left wondering, whose side is this grandpa even on? One of his biggest firestorms came with the film American Sniper. Yes, the one with Bradley Cooper and the rifle. Many thought it was basically a love letter to American militarism, like, look how cool it is to shoot terrorists. But Eastwood shocked everyone by saying it was actually anti-war, that it's about how war breaks people. And now everyone's confused. If it's anti-war, why does it look like a Pentagon recruitment ad? That's because Eastwood is a master of ambiguity. He can direct a movie that one half of the country sees as a Trump manifesto and the other half interprets as a pacifist's desperate plea. And meanwhile he says, I'm just telling a story. Sure, Clint, and that epic flag scene with the orchestra was just a coincidence. His political life is like one of his westerns. Everyone watches him, waiting to see who shoots first, and he just calmly smokes a cigar and mutters something like, to each their own. He was once the mayor of Carmel, California, but a mayor in the style of, I'm here for the parking and good coffee, not the legislation. Even in politics, he managed to remain an actor, just swapped the stage for City Hall. You could say Eastwood is a mirror of America. Contradictory, noisy, sometimes illogical, but absolutely charismatic. He says he's tired of Democrats, then turns around and criticizes Republicans. One day he supports Trump, the next he's vague like, well, we'll see. His political stance is like a wild Mustang, seems to lean one way but can kick you the other at any moment. And the best part? He still does it all with that unshakable cowboy face. No attempts to please everyone. No apologies, he just says what he thinks and walks off, with a camera, a hat, and a steely gaze. In a world where everyone's terrified of offending someone, Eastwood keeps firing off words like quick-draw bullets. Sometimes he hits the bullseye, sometimes he causes chaos, but one thing's for sure, nobody is ever bored.